folk to gather. Can you hear me? Could you give me some kind of signal if you can hear me? Okay, you can. Great. Okay. So I'm just going to hang on for a little bit. While we're waiting, we might get a surprise visit, or my screen might get a surprise visit from my young son at some random point. Hopefully he'll be, well, I'm sure he'll make some kind of interesting contribution, but it may not be on topic, but we'll, and then I'll sort of usher him out if I can. Sounds like that's usually easy, which I have to say it isn't always. Welcome to those of you who just joined. And Nick and Elizabeth, Ruby, do you think I should just start now or hang on for a little bit longer? Any thoughts? Start now?
Yeah, why not?
Why, I think so, Mac.
Very good. Okay. Well, hello to all of you. Good evening and welcome on this online panel and conversation. If you wouldn't mind showing yourself behind the names on the screens, it would be very welcome. But of course, you don't have to, but that would give us a better sense of who's in the room. And we've got this program taking place at Embercombe on the 24th to the 29th of June this year. It's a program that first began last year, and I succeeded in sort of worming my way into some kind of role, which was very loosely framed, well, actually probably framed very adequately by others, but interpreted very loosely by me, to just wander around and enjoy myself as I dipped into the different workshops and contributed where I could. And I'm really happy that it's taking place again this year. And I also believe that it's really, really important piece in the whole offering that we have towards a regenerated and restored world. In the sort of blurb on the website, I noticed that it says we can still find meaning in making. We can still find meaning in making and reconnect with the world around us through our hands. And I was just looking at that and I was thinking, yes, of course, we can connect with our minds. We connect with our emotions, with our imagination, different ways. But surely we are still sufficiently physical as to have a visceral need for real contact. So, you know, if we had a baby, we wouldn't spend most of the time looking at the baby through a screen, would we? We wouldn't think about the baby. We want to hold the baby. And we wish to be in intimate and close relationship with the baby. And I think that's all with all these important relationships. And the same seems to me is something urgent, really kind of urgently required throughout our society to begin to build a bridge back to understanding, knowing, feeling, sensing our natural environment, our mother really, through our hands, creating and making and enjoying and softening all these wonderful natural materials that Elizabeth, Ruby, Nick, and Jessie, who's not with us tonight, love to be but can't be, will be bringing to the course. So we have Nick Kary, who's on my screen at the top, somewhere in the middle, And then we have Ruby Taylor, who's, you can see the name there. And we have Elizabeth Crawford. And we will have Jessie Watson-Brown on the actual physical program. But I thought I'd begin by asking Nick if he would share with us what the motivation for the program was, what he thinks is the core themes or what it's really touches into. And having done that, maybe to share, well, maybe we could do that first and then move on to Elizabeth and Ruby, asking the same question. And a little bit later on, we'll actually get to asking them about the content of what it is that's actually going to take place on the course. But the first bit really is your deeper thoughts and feelings on what you feel to be the themes and the sort of underlying, I don't know what that word is, but the underlying thing that makes this so valuable, I believe, or so important. Okay, so Nick, please share with us if you would.
Hello, everybody. Well, I can't imagine living without the things that we are doing on the course that we are engaging with and that we're offering. I can't imagine life ever was possible without that back in, many, many moons ago, when we, in a more primitive state, engaged with our hands in order to survive. And we've got to this state nowadays when we appear to be independent of that. We appear to be able to survive without it. Actually, I think that's a complete hoodwink. I think that the actual sort of our soul is enriched with contact with nature around us, with the engagement with our hands to make things from it. And not only that, it's obviously also building our shelter, things we need. And it's teaching us much more than that. It's teaching us how to care for the environment. It's teaching us, rather than just being consumers, if we engage in the construction and making our own consumption, we are in an active relationship. And for me, that is fundamentally what this sort of journey is about. It's about relationship. It's not about making something incredible necessarily. It's not about battling nature to extract from it something that sort of feeds our egos or that. It's really to grow within us and across between us all a greater depth of relating to nature and to ourselves, that we are communal with all the beings here and also the plants. And and I think the beauty of this course for me, where we've got the four of us, I'll be representing, if you like, the tree, in a sense. Elizabeth is representing the sort of the growth grasses and other, she'll explain more what she's doing, but the sort of thinner growth. Ruby is working with the earth, with clay, with the, with what's under our feet, what we ignore, what we walk over. And Jessie is working with primitive skills in this particular case, with skins and with tanning and with taking what was a live being and making it into a material to make something of use from. So for me, it's a beautiful dance, and it's a something that is lovely to see in the world generally. There's so much more communication around this. There's so many more people engaging with it, talking about it, and actively doing it. And I feel honored to be with my three compatriots in this, all of whom are extraordinary in what they do, and feel a bit like the old codger, actually. Anyway, that aside, I really welcome the doing the course and getting it going, and welcoming anybody who will be there with us.
Thanks, Nick. I don't think you need to be too concerned about being the old codger in this context, since I'm also present in this room, and sadly on my 70th birthday decided that I really had to let go of middle age and accept the fact that I was now elderly, something like it. Elizabeth, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you, Mac. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, so I guess what's coming up for me just listening to Nick speaking is this sense of us living in this modern world in the West in a very particular material paradigm, where we're often very divorced from the objects that we're using every day, and they're kind of like floating in this material sea where everything feels quite artificial. We maybe don't know who's made what we use every day. We don't know where it's come from. Often the materials are coming from lots of different places. So there isn't kind of a geographic anchor for what we're using. And this course is a way for us to begin coming back into a paradigm of immediacy with what we're using and making, and developing a better understanding and knowledge of actually how to use the materials that grow in our immediate environments to make things that are useful and beautiful. So in that sense, just as an educational kind of process of remembering some of these old crafts, I think this course is really special in the sense that there's this kind of breadth of offerings of different crafts. But also there's this aspect of, as Nick was saying, connecting back with our hands, and the relationship between our hands and the earth and the plants kind of being a conversation and a way of talking and speaking and building relationship to the world around us and getting to know it. And materials are very tactile, you know, it's all about how they feel, how they work in our hands. And I don't know about everyone else, but certainly I've spent a lot of time in my head in my life and doing a lot of study. And I think that that's a very easy way for me to relate to the world, of kind of like intellectual understanding. And this way of relating to the world through our hands is another way of knowing. And I feel like I'm gaining so much by being on this journey of learning through my hands, which of course is just a lifelong process. So yeah, I feel like I could speak on and on. I don't know if Ruby would like to chip in.
Yeah, please go ahead, Ruby.
Thank you. Thanks, Mac. Hello, everyone. Well, I think Elizabeth and Nick have just spoken very eloquently. I'm not sure what I have to add, but I'll start speaking and see where it goes. So I'm bringing clay, and I mean, my feeling is that making is essential human activity. We have these opposable thumbs, which is what makes us human, and that allows us to create all kinds of things. And I think that there's something clearly something incredibly grounding about working with clay. I think it's a very instinctive material to work with. I think that of all the different crafts that I teach, working with clay comes very naturally to people, and it's what we did as children, isn't it? We played with mud, and perhaps in a way, by doing all these crafts, we're returning to some essential aspect of ourselves that's a very important anchor, I think, to our well-being and to understanding our place in the world. I think when you settle into making with your hands, working with materials that you've gathered yourself, that you've sourced yourself, you understand their origin, you understand all the other life forms that depend on it, on that material themselves, or who dwell in that material themselves. And it gives you a connection to the web of life in a way that's very immediate and tangible. And I think that's really valuable, as has already been said, in terms of bringing us back into the bodily experience. And when we're in that bodily experience, we can find space in ourselves and peace in ourselves, and just the pure joy of making, which I think is our birthright. It's who we are. And so I think with the 4 makers on the course, covering the different aspects that Nick outlined, I think that gives a very broad spectrum of interaction with the more than human world, and I think gives a doorway into lots of different ways of relating and finding connection. So I think it's a very rich offering.
Thank you, Ruby. You know, I do last summer have such fond memories when we ran this program. We were blessed, I have to say, with some very lovely weather. The land was just heaving with richness and everything sort of bursting into life. It was gorgeously beautiful. But what I loved about it was I could call in at one of the groups, if I think of Jessie for the moment, Jessie Watson-Brown, and she was doing the tanning work. And as I approached, there's just the sound, sort of soft sound of occasional conversation. There's the smoke rising from a little fire. There are just sort of things being stirred or mixed. There's a lovely, peaceful sense of people engrossed and happy and in relationship with each other and very engaged with what their hands were doing. And then I go across to where Nick was working, and I find again something similar. Though I remember with that little group, there was also a sort of continuous line of people lining up to try and get some additional instruction because they feared that their project was going wrong somehow. So Nick was fielding that work, but the lovely sound of the cleaving of wood and the draw knives and all these other things and the aroma, if you like. And I popped down to Elizabeth and gosh, it was just like being bathed in beauty, really. It was absolutely wonderful with rushes. I think the rushes, were they cut from the lake, Elizabeth, from Embercombe's lake or somewhere else?
We cut some cattail rushes from the Embercombe lake, but a lot of the rush was from Somerset, from a river in Somerset.
Yeah, anyway, it was gorgeous. So now, maybe not necessarily in the same order we did, but I wonder if one of the makers would just take us through what will you actually be offering and teaching in your part on the material program. Maybe Elizabeth?
Yeah, I can start.
Great.
So yeah, I'm a basket maker. And often when people think of baskets, they think of willow baskets. But the basketry we're going to be doing on the material program actually is using a variety of materials, perhaps less familiar to people. So the material that I have been particularly schooled in is English bulrush, which doesn't actually grow at Embercombe, but it grows in abundance in other parts of the UK. So it's a kind of a crop that we harvest annually, and it's something that I can kind of bring in and have access to. And it's a very, very beautiful material. It's got a long history of use as a basketry weaving material. And it's a really great material to begin weaving baskets with because it's soft, it's forgiving. You can learn a lot of techniques with it that you can then apply to other materials. So rush will be featuring as one of our materials, but we'll also be harvesting materials from Embercombe. And the main material is going to be willow bark. So willow rods, which are used for other kinds of basketry, are usually harvested at very early in the year, kind of December, January time. So now's not the time for harvesting that, but the bark comes off beautifully at this time of year and is a really amazing material for weaving with. So we'll be harvesting the willow, taking the bark off, stripping it off, drying it, and then learning some techniques for weaving with the bark. And I think I've got a little sample here of the kind of thing we'll be making. So the kind of rusty red and the black material is the bark, and then the green is rush. And we'll probably be exploring some other fibers as well, like bramble fibers, maybe some field rush that grows at Embercombe. There's a lot of plants that we can explore there, and it will give people a lot of scope for continuing that exploration at home. So yeah, exciting.
Thanks, Elizabeth. What's the difference between British, did you say British bulrush and cattails?
Yeah, so they're different species. So it's a bit confusing because I think people have certain associations with the word bulrush, and they think of the big sausagey seed heads that that you get, and that is actually cattail, or the Carex genus. Whereas the English, the true bulrush, or what we just call it soft river rush, is a Schernoplectris genus, and it doesn't have those big seed heads on it. It actually has these quite modest flowers at this time of year.
Thank you. I'm hoping to be creating some kind of large pond at the top of Embercombe land, so maybe I could introduce that to the pond, but we could have a chat about that.
Yeah,
Ruby,
that'd be wonderful.
Great. Ruby, could you share with us the content side of what you'll be offering?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mac. So we'll be working with clay that has been dug straight from the ground, and we'll also be looking for clay on site. And there is a good source of clay, I gather, on Embercombe. And we'll be making pots and forms out of that clay. We'll be adding temper to make them strong enough to go through the fire, and then we will be firing them. Oh, and actually I'll have earth pigments for decorating whatever people make. So I'll be giving technical assistance on how to make things. We'll be working with the basic principle of making a pinch pot, which has had a bit of a bad press, I think, for people, maybe. But it's actually the foundation of pretty much all hand-built pottery, and that is made just with the hands and not using other tools. It's very versatile. It's a lovely technique, highly tactile, obviously. And so earth pigments can be painted on, and then when the pots are dry, we'll be firing them in a clamp kiln. So that basically involves building a fire, putting the dried pieces on the fire, covering the fire with a small wooden structure and soil, and then it burns for a couple of days. And this is one of the earliest forms of firing. And we know that people were doing that up until the time of the Romans in the UK. And so it was done as a method of firing for thousands of years. So it's a very exciting way to fire pots, because it's so alchemical, where you put what seems like a very fragile object in a fire, and then in that hidden process of the clamp kiln, it's transmuted into ceramic, and then we excavate the kiln on the final day, and it's a bit like being an archaeologist and digging out the pots to find out what's happened in there. So they, with the firings where I teach, we have about a 99.9% success rate. So I don't expect breakages, and so it's very, very satisfying experience.
Thank you, Ruby. It sounds absolutely fantastic. Just a thought, Nick, in support of the finding of the clay, it struck me that getting in touch with Tina Sharman would be a good idea to actually find the locations where she believes the best clay can be found.
Yeah, I'm seeing Tina in a couple of days. So
okay, there was a period during Embercombe's history when all kinds of paths were being constructed on the land, and there were some really wonderful places where we found lots of clay. There is loads of clay at Embercombe, but now it's all well on the way as its rewilding journey, as it were, so rather more difficult to locate. But Tina will know. So you will have your clay, Ruby, and hopefully it'll be good quality for you. Nick.
Well, listening to Ruby strikes me how different what I'm offering is, and how it kind of tunes in with a whole different energy, really. Just very touched by Ruby's description of not working with tools, about the pinch pots, and that sort of quiet relationship. I can just kind of imagine, I got a picture in my head of everyone grouped around doing this. What I offer is kind of involves tools. It's almost impossible without tools. It's almost impossible to imagine it without iron, really, even though it would have bronze and other tools, and even bone and things were used for it. But we will be hopefully harvesting, and I say hopefully because it's around safety and things like that, finding trees in the right place, the right size, but we'll hopefully be harvesting possibly some probably ash, possibly a chestnut, small ones, and we're going to be using those, splitting those to make legs of a stool, and we'll be fashioning tops for stools, and we'll be basically working with wet wood, what's called green wood, to construct a stool over a period of the week. We've still got to, between us or in relation to numbers, decide exactly how everything's going to work. I may be that I'm with two groups, and they were able to do it with two groups. But it's a very beautiful thing. It's using something called a shaving horse, which, much to my amusement, when I found out in another culture, I think it was Greece, is known as a shaving donkey. So, but anyway, basically it is a creature out of wood on which you sit, and it's basically a very primitive clamp, and with that you're able to hold your wood, and you're able to pair it with a two-handled knife called a draw knife. And everybody gets really lost in this work, and it also throws up an issue, which is the issue of perfection. And I bore all my friends with this one, because as you begin to work wood, inevitably what happens, people say, oh, Nick, it's torn. Nick, it's this. Nick, it's that. Well, no. Let's just keep with it, shall we? Just keep with it. And if you look at the word perfection, it comes from the Latin per facere, basically to bring something to completion, is all it means. That is all that perfection means. We, in our sort of Western sort of way, have kind of made everything very linear. And the beauty of actually everything we're offering during this week is that we're just going to be bringing our work to completion, to the place where we feel it lands. And so the greenwood stools that we'll be making will look like they've come out of the hedgerow. I mean, they won't necessarily look like they've come out of IKEA, thank heavens. And nothing like that. They will look like they were branches, because that's what they were. And just a little, woodwork. I'm a fine furniture maker as well as doing this work, and when wood can often so easily bring up this completely linear thinking, and what I always do my absolute best to do when I teach is to make sure we retain as much fluidity as possible. I can't compete with the amount of fluidity that Ruby and Elizabeth will be offering, where their materials allow more. My material it creates resistance, and you will find resistance in yourself around it. It is a sometimes interesting to observe everyone who meets points, goes beyond them, from joy to frustration, and it's just part of the way it is.
Thank you, Nick. So I wonder, maybe we could see that film which Cindy has, just to give all of you watching a little bit of a taste of visually of the program. And then if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask, either in relation to the course that's coming up, or simply to these makers on making, or anything related, then you'd be very welcome. But Cindy, I wonder if we could see that film.
That's me wedging some wild clay in the woods. These are the pots that have been made by a group.
And this is me peeling willow bark that's already had the outer epidermis removed. And that's Jessie tanning.
Me doing some woodwork.
Lovely. Thank you, Cindy. So, do we have any questions or anything anyone would like to ask? Please just literally, physically raise your hand if you do. Yes, please, Marcia, go ahead.
Hi, the main question that's on my mind at the moment is to do with I think people's potential responses to the material, and I wondered what your thoughts on that may be. So, for instance, Nick, you mentioned about wood bringing up sort of concerns about perfection, distance. Elizabeth, I think you specifically used the word forgiving. I don't remember, Ruby, I don't remember you mentioning something specific about people's potential responses, but with your description of the process of, or aspects of the process of working with the clay, I imagine that there was there's just an automatic need for people to, in a sense, give the process space. Like there's a lot that just can't be controlled about it, and that just needs to be kind of accepted and waited for. So I was wondering if, I was wondering really about your thoughts on what it was about, maybe with each of you, what your thoughts are about the material itself, and or what's involved in the process of working with it, and sort of affect people's experience of working with it, or can bring up sort of particular types of responses in each case.
Thank you, Marcia. Would one of you like to take this up at this point?
I'll jump in first. Great question, fantastic question, Marcia. And I've already slightly spoken into it, I guess, but you know, when I able to stand back when I'm running a group, and look and watch everybody, what I see is quite a lot of energy often being expended, and then at times, and then a much greater softness, and people going, because often, you know, you need a big mallet, you need to be hitting to split. It takes an awful lot of energy. I find self-judgment often with people who feel that their wrists aren't strong enough, but once they begin to let go of that expectation in their heads, you know, it just begins to unfold. And I really remember many years ago, actually at Embercombe, I was working with a big group, and I remember there was one individual in that group who was really, really struggling, and I had done my best to support this individual, and had gone away only for my co-facilitator to tap me on the back about half an hour later and say, Nick, look. And this individual was just absolutely relishing the whole process. They'd been fighting with it and battling with it, but they'd kind of got over a hump. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that the wood isn't all plain sailing, that it allows you to meet yourself in it, and also be sensible about it, not overstress. You know, the potential for potentially hurting oneself is there through cutting with a blade or through hitting something too hard. So I think it's a really quite a deep learning process with wood, about one's not so much competence, but one's in tuneness with oneself, and it reflects back to you really quite quickly. And for some people that can for a while be challenging.
Thanks, Nick. Ruby or Elizabeth?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Marcia. I think that with all learning experiences, I think each person brings a whole history of what it has meant to them to be in a learning situation. So, you know, that's a massive variable. You know, some people have had very good learning experiences early in their life, some have not so much, and so that will always show up, I think, in any learning situation, particularly perhaps with working with the hands. in terms of specifically with clay and the process that I'll be sharing, one of the things I really love about clay while you're working it is that at any point you can crush what you made and remake it. And that was always my most favorite thing when I was studying it at art college, was that malleability and that mutability of it. When it comes to the firing, yes, there's with ceramics, there is always, in any situation of making pottery, there is always an element of risk and letting go when you're firing a piece, whether you're firing it the way we're firing it, in a very simple way with actual fire, or whether you're putting it in a kiln. You always have unknowns. And so, you know, for some people that's very comfortable, for some people that's a little bit of an edge. Yeah, that's what can I say? That's life, isn't it, really? I think these things embody one's experience and relationship to so many aspects of life.
Well, thank you. Elizabeth.
Sorry if my phone interrupted that, Ruby. Yeah, echoing what Ruby said about the kind of variability of experience, but in my relationship with the basketry materials, and I guess in witnessing other people learning, there's this interesting kind of contrast between the process of harvesting the materials and going out and being in the kind of expansiveness of the environment, and the kind of quietness of the plants and the harvesting. And it can feel very sort of peaceful and just a really kind of beautiful way to be in the world, be in that kind of gentle harvest. But then the actual weaving is a skill, obviously. So initially it can be quite frustrating to kind of get to grips with how to, you know, perform this technique to make a basket come together. But yeah, as you pointed out, Marcia, there is this kind of forgiving nature. So, you know, you can always go back and do it again, especially with the rush and these kind of materials. There's a, you know, you can kind of like really, you know, tease it and tug it and twist it and kind of get a feel for it, which I really like. And then gradually there just becomes this rhythm. You know, it's a meditation, and unlike the clay and the wood, and maybe not the wood so much, but definitely with, you know, with the clay, there's this constant sort of, you know, maybe changing the pressure, changing the form of what you're making. With the basketry, there's this kind of real like meditation that you can sink into with it once you really get it. And then there'll come a point where you have to change that, and there's this kind of interruption into that field of like, oh, I need to do a different technique, or I need to do the border, or introduce a new material. So yeah, I think it can be incredibly peaceful, but there's also this very intense focus that can happen that can also be a bit all-consuming and frustrating at times as well.
Perhaps I can add in here as well, Marcia. I mean, I love making, and I made many things, little brush baskets, willow baskets, longbow, different things, and do love it. But I a couple of years ago, I thought I'd really love to go and really learn something. So I engaged with a willow basket maker, and I went many times through the winter. But I also suffer from this form of dyslexia called dyscalculia. And it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, for me to remember sequences. While I'm in it and know it, I can do it, and I think I can do it quite well. And then as soon as we're past that, I'm struggling again. And this raises all kinds of really quite difficult, challenging emotional feelings and memories of when I was younger and deemed to be stupid, so to speak, which was really, really tough. So I've got, in the end, I stopped, but prior to that, I got the basket maker to make baskets, and I videoed each single little bit of it so that I always have something to refer back to. But it hasn't stopped me, you know. So now this last winter, I made about 10 hazel hurdles. And for that, you have to split the hazel wands, and that's a skill. And then ultimately, you know, you got this beautiful object which serves a function as well, which is something else I love. It's the unity somehow between something that has aesthetic beauty and qualities and also some kind of practical application. And I often, I find it quite painful how so often we separate these things so that we fill our houses with objects, if you like, which are aesthetically sort of upsetting if once you understand where they come from and how they're made and all the rest of it. And then we visit art galleries or something to see something beautiful. But anyway, I guess those things will come up. Are there any other questions from anyone they'd like to ask at this point? Anything else at all? Okay, well, Nick or either Elizabeth or Ruby, is any parting comment or anything you would like to offer before we close?
I'm just aware of, I'm just aware of Jessie's absence and that what she'll be offering hasn't been talked about. I don't know if Nick or Elizabeth feel able to talk about that on her behalf, or if there are specific questions in the group here about what she's doing.
I think I can talk, and Elizabeth can back me up if I get it wrong. But as far as I know, Jessie is going to be looking at tanning fish skins, and so that will require gathering willow bark. Is that right, Elizabeth? Yep. And to make a tanning mix and to tan over a period of time, and then to once that the fish skins are tanned, to make little wallets and purses out of them. And potentially to make other things as well. So it would be a whole process really, from taking a live perishable material to being a workable strong. It's actually a very beautiful thing to do, because it does kind of take one from this, you know, some people's perception of fish skins is yucky, you know, and to go from there to something serviceable and rather beautiful is very lovely to watch. So that's
yeah.
Could I add something about the way that Jessie works? Because I did attend a tanning workshop with her a couple of years ago. Her sensitivity to the living animal is very deep, and she has a very strong ethical code around it. And I know she has something on her website, so if anybody wanted to check that out to find out where she's coming from, because I know for lots of people it can be quite an uncomfortable issue to work with the animals in this way. So if that's you, I highly recommend checking out her website and her statement about how she works with the animals.
Thanks, Ruby.
And the other thing I'd like to add, Mac, is just to kind of imagine that, you know, how this works when we're up at Embercombe. We've got the woods at Embercombe, and we'll be all on the margin of the woods or within the woods. And as Mac, I think, alluded to at the beginning of this, the noises that are coming out, the sort of group moving from one place to another, you know, people coming in, it's very beautiful. It's very held within the land. And for those of you who don't know the land at Embercombe, it's a wonderful holding space. And it is a privilege to be able to run this course there and have a lot of the materials that we could be using coming from the land. Not that we are necessarily all doing that, because of, you know, sometimes it's more straightforward, but we'll certainly be introducing everyone to what grows there and to the resources available in a way that hopefully will allow you to encourage you to, wherever you walk, to view things in a different way in the future. To, you know, I'll be talking about trees and about the different trees and the different properties of them. And I'm sure the others will be, you know, doing similar things. So it allows us all to engage with nature in a different way.
Thanks, Nick. Marcia, I think you had another question, is that right?
Yeah, it was only a brief one. It was just to do with the fish. I just wondered whether the rest of the fish would get sort of cooked and eaten, or what would happen to it. If any of you knew, but I could always email Jess about that, I guess, or check the website.
All I know is what she did last year when she got the fish skins from a fishmonger. We don't have enough fish in the lake at Embercombe. The fish skins came from fish production. And so she was just getting the fish skins themselves, not the whole fish. Is that right, Elizabeth? I think, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't know you, Elizabeth and Ruby, anything like as well, but I've known Jessie for a long time and Nick for a long time. And I'm sure it's the same for each of these people. There's some, you know, long stories really sitting behind the skill and the sensitivity, if you like, which are located now. So it's another rich part of it is the conversations, the sharing. And I would just add this again, you know, in what's her name? Oh dear. Well, what's her name? The
Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Robin, thank you. Robin Wall Kimmerer's amazing and beautiful and wondrous book. You know, various points she's describing people harvesting and making. And, you know, I read that, I just thought, yes, you know, it is entirely, this is like living this spiritual life where it is almost recognizing and seeing that it is all around us, that we're breathing it in, that we're handling it, that we're touching it, that we're in relationship with it, and that it means everything. As indeed to so many Indigenous people, it has always been part of their whole worldview. And I think it's through the handling of these materials and learning about them and beginning and making again that perhaps we get a little bit closer to finding our way home, or so it seems to me. So I think we're coming to a close now. Anything else from anybody before we do actually close?
Hi, Mac.
Hi, Cindy.
Yeah, I thought I'd just like to share my experience because I was on the program last year and I absolutely loved it. Knowing the land of Embercombe very well, this was an amazing program because it really gave me a completely different relationship with the land there and the environment, and it was such an intimate experience, and it brought up so much, like it was a real journey for me personally, and I felt this that the materials themselves, but also the process and the environment taught me so much just through the kind of somatic experience of interacting with these different kinds of materials. It was just such a rich experience. And also there's something very very deep about like just sitting with other people making things, and it's something it feels so intrinsic to being human, that words aren't needed, that we can just connect with each other through the movements of our body and getting into kind of rhythm with each other, and the kind of collaboration that's needed, and this sort of resonance that's generated through just through being together and being in this natural environment. And we were very lucky. We had an absolutely gorgeous week, and it was stunning weather, and everybody there was really, really enthusiastic. So it was a fantastic, quite unique experience, I thought, because often these crafting courses are, you know, in a workshop somewhere or something. So to work with the materials in the environment where they grow is really exciting, I found.
Thank you, Cindy. And I note in the chat you've just left, if they want to find out more, there's a link there that people can use. Okay, well, thank you very much to you, Nick, to Elizabeth, and to Ruby. And blessings to Jessie as she struggles to manage whatever hassle she's experiencing as she travels back home. And very warm good wishes to all of you who joined us here for this call. And we'll say goodbye now.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.